Hey, up. Right, while I was researching Wednesday's videos, I sort of got my head into statistics about sales of motorcycles last year and how they've gone so far this year. And one thing that stood out to me is that modern classic motorcycles are a growing sector worldwide in motorcycle sales. Not only that, it's the sort of 125 to 500 capacity segment of motorcycling that's also growing. So people are going for the modern classic style of motorcycle, and they're going for the smaller capacity bikes these days. You know, there's a very definite and tangible trend. Now, all motorcycle sales dropped last year to a sort of record low, if you like, due to various things that are going on around the world, including a cost of living crisis, with most motorcycle classes like, you know, scooters, adventure tourers, sports bike, dropping in sales by between 20 and 30+%. Yet modern classics only dipped by 9%, with the lion's share going to the 350cc class. Now, all in all, they reckon that this segment is growing by around about 21% over the last 2 or 3 years. Now, if you're a regular viewer of this channel that does, you know, after all, sort of specialise in modern classic ownership, I'm sure you'll understand the allure of modern classic bikes, especially the sort of smaller capacity bikes. But, you know, I get questions every day from people that just they don't get it, they don't understand it at all. So I thought I'd take the time today to try and understand or give my interpretation of what I think is happening. Because this is a growing trend that's not just happening in the realms of motorcycling, it's happening in other industries as well. You know, I go back to the early 1970s wristwatches. The art of timekeeping hadn't changed much at all for 200 years. It was the same basic mechanical principles that we used for, you know, monitoring the time. And then in the early 1970s, there was a horological revolution, quartz technology. It started off with LED watches, and then by the end of the 1970s we switched to LCD technology, but still the same basic timekeeping principles, quartz technology. A cheap, soulless product that took all the pride of ownership out of wearing a wristwatch, which created another shift. We went back to analog watches, but still using quartz technology. Now, arguably, these sort of original digital watches were a revelation compared to the humble wristwatch. You know, they had dual time zones, alarms on them, calendars, a whole host of new features. They had way more functionality and practicality than the humble three-handed wristwatch. And although the digital watch did survive and is still around today, the whole market swung back to the traditional sort of analog watch, albeit that it was using quartz technology. And then about 10 years ago, along came the smartwatch. Timekeeping had hit rock bottom. I bought my first and last smartwatch, and within a year it had pushed me back to a traditional spring-powered analog watch. Even though it had a huge choice of analog watch faces, it was a constant distraction, a constant annoyance, beeping and buzzing every time I got a text message or an email or any other form of notification. It drove me nuts. Despite its cutting-edge technology, it detracted from my life. It didn't add to it. And it was the primitive, by comparison, nuts and bolts technology of a spring-round watch that brought the pleasure of timekeeping back to me. And not just me, the traditional watch market over the last 10 years has grown exponentially as all the old brands have found a resurgence in popularity. The advent of quartz technology, what is known as the quartz crisis, all but killed off most of the major brands around the world. But in the last 10 years, they've all bounced back to record levels. They're selling tens of millions of spring-wound watches all over the world. because they tap into a human need that some of us have for precision, quality and dependability in a classic package that never needs to be upgraded. It doesn't overwhelm you with things that you don't need. It just performs one function and it does it well. Just like a modern classic motorcycle. Modern classic bikes are basic, bare bones transport. For the most part, they're not bloated with unnecessary technology. And those that do have an abundance of technology, TFT screens, that kind of thing, tend not to be the best sellers. They're not performance-oriented machines. Again, there are performance-oriented versions, but they tend not to be the best sellers. For the most part, it's just a real-world, down-to-earth, practical performance that tends to sell the best. Which is why the 350cc class seems to be emerging as the new market leader. Good safe handling is important and most of them achieve that, but a top speed of 70 to 80 miles an hour is about as much as you need on modern roads. As the Rolls-Royce brochure used to state, performance is adequate. They don't come equipped with an abundance of power and performance that you simply can't use. And they follow traditional design cues. They're not specialised in any ways. You know, they're not a sports bike, they're not a tourer, they're not an adventure tourer. They're a motorcycle, an all-round motorcycle. They follow the traditional roadster design. And the traditional roadster configuration is the most flexible and versatile motorcycle configuration. It'll do anything. And because modern classic motorcycles are modern motorcycles classically designed, it means that the owner can sort of shrug off that rat race one-upmanship mentality of upgrading to, you know, the latest and greatest style and design. The latest fads that go out of date so quickly without compromising on style and pride of ownership. I mean, you can spend £10,000 or £20,000 on the latest two-wheeled, all-singing, all-dancing rocket ship, and when you're out and about, no one will notice. But you can spend £4,000 or £5,000 on a modern classic motorcycle and everyone notices it. It turns heads wherever you go. In fact, if I'm honest, it can be a bit annoying. You can't go anywhere without someone stopping you and asking you about your bike. Just like a good quality mechanical watch, a good quality modern classic motorcycle frees you up psychologically. It allows you to get back to the basics of what motorcycling actually is without all the frippery and clutter that modern motorcycles bring with them. It's not just about nostalgia. I mean, you know, often people talk about the nostalgic side of modern classic bikes. I don't really understand how you can experience nostalgia for a genre of motorcycle that came before you were born. Nostalgia to me is something that you experience from past experiences, not someone else's past experiences. And I think we're seeing a bit of a sea change in that respect with Japanese manufacturers like Kawasaki, Yamaha, Honda and even Suzuki now dipping the toes into modern classic motorcycles from the 1970s and 1980s era as the demographics of motorcyclists shift with the passage of time. I mean, I have to admit, I always considered the 70s and the 80s to be a bit of a tragic time for design and fashion. But when I think back to some of those traditional roadsters that were definitely around in the 70s, and some of which were still around in the 1980s, I've got to admit it does tug on my heartstrings a bit. I've always thought the sort of mid-1980s is when motorcycling all went wrong. Now, I do hope that this video has sort of resonated with some people. It's something that, you know, is always sort of running around in my mind, you know, struggling to sort of understand what it is about modern classics that attract me. And I have tried before to put it into words on a video, as I have done this time. I'll maybe get it right one day. I always feel as though this subject has a depth that I haven't quite reached yet. Anyway, let me know in the comments section, what is it about modern classic motorcycles that sort of attracts you? What is it about them that pulls you in? I'd be interested to know what other people's feelings are on the subject. I know a lot of you see the sort of correlation between modern classics and mechanical watches, because I get comments about it all the time. But I really would like to hear what your thoughts are on the subject. Once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and my other videos, and in doing so helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you would leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber. It's totally free and you can unsubscribe at any time you like. Or you can, if you want, leave a donation through PayPal or join up to my Patreon page, details of which are in the video description down below. Or you can use the Super Thanks button down below the picture that you're watching now. It's appreciated but not essential. I am of course going to be back next week, so until then, please ride safely and I'll see you soon.